Welcome to Sharing the Middle, where we share our stories of the messy middle of life. I'm Lacey, your friend and guide through the middle. My claim to fame this week is for my family to survive COVID and travel back because of COVID. It's been a bit of a week, but it's okay. We're here. We're doing it. We're fine. If you're a longtime listener, then you'll hear the music in the beginning is different. And, I was just ready for a change. Also, once you pick something like that, you hear it everywhere. We were watching a commercial and it was on there and my husband just looked at me and I'm just sitting here and I'm like, yeah, it's time. Today is a return to form for me in interviewing other people about the messy middles of their lives. Today, you're going to hear from Josi Dumont. I loved our conversation. It felt so good and Josi's just lovely. Her story is really fascinating and brave and I know you're going to love it. Let's jump right in. Welcome, Josi. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
I'm so happy to be here, Lacey. Thank you for having me.
You and I connected via Threads, and I am so excited to hear your messy middle. But first, why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yes, happy to do so. This is always a question where I'm like, okay, where to start without the messy middle to not give too much away. But hi, everyone. I am Josi Dumont, and I am now a leadership and mindset coach. Have been doing that for almost 3 years now, which is crazy to me. And I've been working with dozens of women worldwide to really turn their self-doubt into self-trust, to doing it their way, to build businesses, to find their dream careers, to find new partners. So I also wrote a book. So I'm also an author and also a fellow podcast host, actually. Yeah. That's a very short version.
And where are you in the world?
So I'm based in London in the UK. It has been my home of heart for 6 years now. Originally, I'm from Germany, but that's like a chapter where I'm like, nope, I will never go back. London is where the vibes are. This is where I'm happy.
I saw somewhere that you're in London and I'm like, but your accent isn't quite what I would think is British. So. Thank you for sharing. I'm actually going to Germany for the first time in October. So I'm excited.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you going to the Oktoberfest?
No, So I have a chronic illness, and so travel is hard for me in general. This is actually a trip that we planned before I was chronically ill, and then I got chronically ill, and then we had to cancel. To make our lives as easy as possible, we're doing one of the river cruises and just making life as easy. So we're going down the Rhine, starting in Amsterdam, down the Rhine to Basel, Switzerland. So we'll hit a couple places.
No, that's literally where I'm from.
Really?
Basel, that area around Basel, Switzerland.
Yeah, well, we're going to be there for a hot second and take a train to Paris because I've always wanted to go to Paris. So
I'm so excited for you.
Thanks. I cannot stress how important this trip is going to be for me in just so many different ways, proving to myself that I can do it after chronic illness. You seem to get what I meant by messy middle right away. So I'd love to hear that initial thought of what that meant to you.
Yeah, for me, messy middle, I got immediately taken back to 2020, 2021, because I felt like that was my messy middle. And how I see it is before the middle was the uprun to it, all the decisions I made, everything that has happened before that contributed to me being in a place where I was like, what the fuck is this? How did I get here? And just to give a little bit of story to what was before, I was having a steep finance career. I was working in the corporate space. Everything was going well. I just moved to the UK with my back then fiance, and everything seemed ringo rosy, amazing.
Yeah.
And then the middle happened. Mm-hmm. And the middle was first me burning out because I was leading a huge project. And it took everything out of me. It was obviously also during COVID. Shit was going down.
Yeah.
Physically and mentally, I was already exhausted. I was dead.
Yeah.
And that was the first part. And then also I started realizing that my relationship back then wasn't actually the greatest. It was very toxic. And I kept on ignoring all of the red flags for so long But being in this very vulnerable space or of already being exhausted was just like a big curtain dropping and showing me all the ugliness in this supposedly perfect. And I was just like, whoa, things are not going in the right direction here. This is very, very bad. The thing is, we still got married. But then on the wedding day, it was finally the day where I was like, okay, no, this is not my man. I need to get out. And then afterwards, we immediately started the splitting up process. And literally a couple months later, it was all annulled as if it never happened. So I got out, but still at the point in time was like, okay, I'm burnt out. I'm physically exhausted, mentally exhausted. I have a toxic relationship to deal with. And then also at work, it wasn't just a burnout. It was also that we went through another restructuring. And I think it was like the third one. And despite me being in the teams who are designing the new space, designing the new department, and being in the sprint teams and being like super involved, it was again redundancy. I asked the question, like, do you want to stay or leave? And I was like, do you know what? I want to leave. I have no idea what I could do, but I want to get out. So yeah, there were loads of crazy, scary decisions I had to make in such a short amount of time. And that was my messy middle. I can't even describe it. It was just chaos. It was emotional chaos and it was draining. But at the same time, I know this messy middle was so needed for me to come out so much stronger and really say, I got to choose myself here. I got to do what is right for me. Left corporate, left the toxic relationship, built my own business. Here we are.
I mean, that takes an incredible amount of self-trust. Like, to look around at almost every single facet of your life and say, no, like, I can't. So I very much relate to your story of like things coming down at once and it forcing me to do something. But mine was a chronic illness that I didn't have a choice in. So I applaud you in that you made that choice. That's a big freaking deal that you chose to make the choice. So kudos to you, first off. The other thing I want to say is I love that you were in the messy middle, but you could see the plot points of how you got there. Because I think a lot of times we don't see those plot points until we get to a certain moment. And it's like, oh shit, that led to this, that led to, and that's very hard. I am curious though, you mentioned like your wedding day, and then you mentioned your like redundancy and that kind of stuff. And I just want to say redundancy here, we're talking about like in America, we would call it like layoffs and that kind of thing. So
yeah,
being let go, that kind of thing. But is there like, when you think about it, is there like a visceral moment that you're like, this was the moment that I felt it? So like for me, for example, it was a Halloween night. My parents were taking my kids trick-or-treating. And it was like this moment of my world is different. My world will be different. I have realized this is it. So I'm just curious, did you have a visceral moment like that?
Yes, as you were talking, the moment that came up for me was I had a meeting scheduled with one of my managers and HR about the layoff, about what's next. They were asking me, Josie, do you want to stay? Do you want to take this role or do you want to leave? And I remember coming into the call, camera off, and I was very quiet and was just answering the questions. At the same day, short before the call, I had a massive fight with my, obviously now ex. And then at some point, they just asked me, so what is next for you? Like, what would make you happy? And I was just like, I don't know. I was crying my eyes out in that interview. And they were just like, it's okay. Like, they didn't know what to do. And I could see their faces, but they couldn't see me. And I was just like, this is so horrible. And they didn't know what everything, like all the other stuff that was going on, because I didn't share like the wedding, the divorce and everything. And afterwards, when I locked off the call, I was like, things need to change like quick. This cannot go on. And at that time and space, I think I considered myself kind of lucky because I got into a training and they offered 2 complimentary coaching sessions And up to that point, I've never been coached before. Only I had a mentor myself. And so I talked to my coach and I was like, what are we going to do? and she then really helped me to just literally do like a pro and contra list. She just helped me to realize, okay, this is shit. And this is what I want. There's not much on the pro list, but this is what I want. There are some bits that I want to change. And that just gave me the clarity of, okay, we need to get into action. We need to get into gears. And throughout my whole life in general, I always had to pick myself out of shitty situations. So I knew, okay, here we go again. It's another ride on the roller coaster. We're at the bottom right now. So let's go back up. It's okay. You can do this. And one thing I was like always telling myself, you can see it in the background, is I am, I can, I will.
Mm-hmm.
So I will. And that got me through. And I was just always reminding myself of that. So this meeting was definitely the kickoff to me starting to change things, to realizing I need to do something right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I also can just put myself in your shoes in that moment of being in a Zoom call. Okay. No. I am also curious too. You mentioned in the beginning, and from what I've read, that you very much approach about doing things your way. So not the way that you should do things. And this is also something that I didn't know that I'd call it shoulding. I was shoulding all over myself. I didn't know that I was doing it. And then once I started to see it, I couldn't ignore it. It was so insidious in so many parts of my life. So I'm curious, what were your shoulds that you were really holding on to?
So many. I guess the biggest ones were, oh, you should stay in the corporate space because it's safe. You have a stable kind of income. At the same time, because obviously going through layoffs, this is not safe at all. Like, I can be made redundant tomorrow. And I am. So, but that was a big should. And also, like, everybody in the family was like, so what are you going to do now? You will take the job, right? You will stay. That's the reasonable decision. That's what you should do. People were thinking like, well, you got married. That's for life. So you should stay with that person, right? And it was quite funny when I told some of my family members and friends about the divorce. They were like, you sure you don't want to talk about it with him? And I was like, I'm not taking this decision lightly, you know? It's not like I just came up with this idea and was like, cool, let's fly with it. No, this is important. This is it. This is final. But they were still like, well, but you should try this. You should try to find peace, or you should try to make it work again. But I was like, no, I really don't want to. And know it deep inside of me, this is not right. Like, something needs to change. Then also with burnout, the should was, oh, but you still need to work. You should still work, or you should just take some time off and you will be fine again. Like, just do a little bit more of like meditations, have a little bit more free time and you will be fine again. Maybe you should take a sabbatical. That's not going to help me. It's literally not going to help me. So those were all of those shoulds. And to some degree, they made it really hard for me to take the decisions that I took, because it was just like, well, should I actually do that? Would it actually be the right decision for me to take? But every time so how I call my intuition is like a forward pull, or it's like a backward push. So every time I try to tune into corporate, into the past relationship, into everything else that happened, I was like, ugh, it gave me the ick. It literally gave me the ick. I was like, nah, I can't do that. And every time I was thinking about becoming a coach, entrepreneurship, really helping people, doing things my way that feels right to me, according to my values. I wanted to have impact. I wanted to be authentic. I wanted to have freedom to do my own thing. There was such a forward pull. It felt so expansive. So I just knew, okay, follow this. Follow your way. Follow what you want to do and just go for it. You will figure it out. You always do. That's what I did.
I love the visual of a push and a pull. One of the ways that I've been managing my energy is, am I pushing myself to do this? Am I pushing through? Am I pushing? And so to think of the opposite of like, well, is this pulling me towards it? I find for me, the looking at things in the more positive, not necessarily like toxic positivity or that kind of stuff, but like the thing that's that, or like showing what I am doing, not what I'm not doing, has that mentality has really changed a lot of my mindset. So I like the idea of even just reframing too. For me, I'm not pushing to do these things. I'm being pulled to do these other things.
Yes.
That's really powerful. Really powerful. If you have a few minutes today, if you could take a moment and review Sharing the Middle, that would be such a huge help. Reviews help people find us and show that Sharing the Middle is a podcast worth listening to, which obviously I think it is. So if you're on Apple Podcasts, head on over to Sharing the Middle homepage and you can leave a 5-star review. Thanks for your support. How did you communicate that to those people who were saying, well, no, you should? Because I think that's a real, especially as women, we are so trained to not push back when someone says that we should be doing something or authority. And so I'm just curious, like, how did you manage that almost fallout afterwards of like, no, you're wrong. You know, like, I'm not going to follow your... Because I think that fear is what stops people a lot of times.
Yeah. I think what helped me was communicating my final decision. Like, I already knew this is going to happen no matter what you say. This is already done. For me, this is already like black and on white paper. So even though they were like, oh, but you should try, I was like, no, it's already decided. Like, for me, this was like such a certainty, and that really helped because I just knew whatever you say, if you give me $1 million, I still wouldn't do it. If you give me $2 million, I still wouldn't do it. I wouldn't go back. Like, this is final. So going at it and communicating literally the final decision without having any wiggle room for people to influence you with their external opinions that have nothing to do with your life, I feel really, really helps, because that's also what then creates even more self-trust in yourself, because you know for yourself this is the right decision, no matter what anyone else says. They will judge you anyway. Yeah. They will judge you whether you do it or whether you don't do it, because they might say, oh, see, now she stayed because she felt too scared to go into entrepreneurship. Or they could say, oh, now she left her secure corporate job just to be an entrepreneur. Like, they will always say something. So just give them permission to say whatever they want and follow your own lead, and really remind yourself of, for me, this is the right decision. And I communicated that. Whether you accept it or not, you can say about what you want, but this is my new reality.
So we kind of had our middle, and I asked you about before the middle, and now I want to think about what happened afterwards. Did you have signposts that you were doing things right? Did you have struggles that you were really questioning yourself? What did that look like?
I did have signposts because, as I mentioned, I got into coaching, and it was kind of like a last hurrah from my company, and a last hurrah and thank you from one of my managers who signed me off to do the foundational kind of like training as a coach on company's expenses. Which I was, and I still am so grateful for it, because he was just like, because he was leaving too, so he was like, yeah, I signed that for you. That's okay. And I was like, nice. Thanks. So that was one of my kind of like milestones, literally like a lighthouse, in the distance that was like guiding my path. So I was like, okay, this is the next step. I finished this training. And I finished that training, and then I knew, okay, I want to do certification. I want to be like a proper ICF accredited and certified coach. I want to do this full on and go like literally all in, because I absolutely loved the impact coaching had. Not only because I saw it on myself, but as I started coaching clients, I was just like, holy shit, this is life-changing for all of us. I need to do this. I need to do more of it because it's aligned with my values. So finishing the training, then finishing the certification, that was another like light post. And then obviously just diving into entrepreneurship, I was like, cool, I want to have that many clients, but I also want to have this and this and this. And with some of those things, they turned out as, okay, that's trickier than expected. For example, with like a podcast for 2 years, I was so convinced I need to do it with someone else. And I was waiting for someone else, asking other people, hey, do you want to do it together? And everybody was at first, yes, let's do a podcast together. And then it just fizzled out and died, and we never did anything. So some of these were really frustrating. And I was just like, what am I doing? Will I ever have a podcast? Then the same thing with a book. 3 years ago, the idea came back up. It was like a childhood dream. I wanted to write a book. But for 2 more years, I didn't start. I was just like, am I really the right person to write a book? Do I have enough to say? What do I want to write about? Would people read it? So I was going through all of those kind of like doubting questions. But because I had the tools myself now as a coach as well, I was just like, okay, let's go through this. Let's coach myself through this. And then I did it. I did my podcast alone. I wrote my book. It's all out now. So it's fascinating how, so these were obviously like lighthouses as well. The podcast, the book, like these are all milestones. And I love how I'm reflecting right now. It's just so nice, as you said it yourself, right? You see those points that led you to the messy middle, and then I saw the point that kind of got me out. And now again, like at this point, I see the points that I actually did take, basically, that got me to where I am now and to where I will be going in future as well. I love that metaphor.
I used to advise students. One of the things that I always said is you don't need to have a destination in mind. You just need to be working down a path. That path may change. It may go. So I like your lighthouse analogy of, okay, I have my path to this lighthouse. I get to the lighthouse. What light do I see next? But I also just love listening to your story because I see so much of my own in the same thing, which is one of the reasons why I do this podcast, is because the more that I learn about other people's stories, the more that I learn that it's so easy to see yourself in other people's stories and that we're not alone and that we all have these struggles and whatnot. I do want to ask too about your love life, because that's a big kind of part of it. It's really nice that you were able to do an annulment and be like, it's almost like it never happened. What did the rest of that look like for you?
That is one of my most favorite parts, actually. It was, again, kind of like an intuition burst. I have, up to that point when that happened, I have never been in my whole life on Tinder. I have never been my whole life on any dating websites or apps. I had no clue how they work from like a 31-year-old woman. So I was just like, downloading Tinder, I had the urge suddenly. I was like, I need to download Tinder today. So I downloaded Tinder and it was like, how does this work? What do I do? And I was swiping and swiping, and I was swiping like left so often that at some point Tinder was like, okay, we ran out of men. We need to increase like the range.
It's good to know what you don't want. I mean,
yes, exactly. I was like, there's nothing wrong with being picky.
Nope.
And I think out of 5 people I swiped to the right side, there was one guy who just ticked all the boxes. And I had loads of boxes after, obviously, the failed relationship. And I was like, he really seems very, very nice. And it was funny because for him, he said he only just re-downloaded Tinder, and I was one of the first matches for him as well. So I was just like, okay, that's special. And then we went on our first date, and I think we spent like 6 hours in a Japanese kind of like sake bar talking all night. And it was so nice. And yeah, literally like the whole love story unfolded from there. Like we lived together. We've been together for 2.5 years now. And it's literally been the best relationship I could ever ask for. Like sometimes, actually I had a moment today, because he was reading my book. Every morning, 9 to 9:30, he takes time to read my book. And I was just looking at him taking a picture and was like, how did I get so lucky to have someone who supports me in everything I do, accepts me truly for who I am. I can just be my quirky ass self, and I'm still loved. And he also like supports me, and he reads my book. He makes time to read my book, right?
My heart is exploding right now.
Mine is too. I'm just like, oh love you, Debbie.
Yeah. So, get into your podcast. That's another huge love thing right there. That can be a slog.
So yeah, it's just like, wow, I literally found the love of my life on Tinder. And the funniest thing is, I have to add that into, is so with my ex, I could never see having children. I was really strict. I was like, I do not want children. But now, with my man now sitting in the living room, my ovaries are singing. And I'm like, I finally can see it. I can see myself being a mom, but also because I have the right guy who can be a father. So to me personally, that has been such a huge shift, because I was always like, no, I don't want kids. I don't want kids. So people who are listening to this, who were always like, oh yeah, you just wait. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I have to admit, changed.
It's really funny. The episode that's going to come out for before this is I talk with nieces. We talk about what it's like to that I'm their aunt and just that kind of stuff. And one of them is very staunch. Like, she will not have kids. And I told her, I'm like, you do you, first of all. I have 2 children. And if there's anything that I know is that if you choose to not have kids, I 100% get it. Like, it's so much work. It's so hard. But I think the beauty of it is that you can always change your mind. You don't have to have an answer for that right now. And I do 1000% agree with you that having the right partner makes the world of difference in that. Yep. Absolutely. So I still can't get over it that he reads your book every morning for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just it's so sweet. I'm thinking about if my husband is very lovely, but we've also been together for 14 years. He's like, I know what's going on. I don't need to learn more.
He already knows it. He doesn't need to read the book.
Well, I do like to bookend things and wrap the episode up with a piece of advice from you, whether that's something that you used or needed in the middle, maybe something that you've lived by. What piece of advice would you give?
I definitely mentioned it before, like just the saying, I am, I can, I will, because it always reminded me of, I have everything that I need right now to get me out of this shithole, or out of any messy middle I might be in. I got myself in there. I got to take ownership. I got to take leadership to get myself out there again. And this is really, really powerful in knowing that you can do it, and really building this kind of self-trust to also keep on going your own way. Like really honing in on your strengths, maybe working on your weaknesses, but also it's fine to be imperfect. There is no perfect human being on this planet. So do your own thing. And that's your path to the most fulfilled life that you can have.
Never knew how much I didn't trust myself until I started to see that. I'm like, oh, that's why that's not working, is because I've never trusted myself. How do I trust myself? And it's like any relationship. It takes time and effort, and to be reminded that I can, and I will. Where can people find you, find your book, all that good stuff?
So you can find me literally anywhere and everywhere with just my name, Josi Dumont. So it's JOSIDUMONT. So you can find me on Instagram, my website, LinkedIn, YouTube. My podcast is very uncreative in the name. It's just the Josi Dumont podcast. There you go. And obviously my book is also linked everywhere. It's And There She Goes Her Way, literally talking about whatever I just talked about in this episode as well. Please do reach out if you want to get in touch, if you experience the same, if you have questions. I'm literally an open book, and I'm always happy to connect with people.
Are you still coaching? Could people potentially work with you if that's something they're interested in?
Yes, absolutely. I do offer one-on-one coaching services. You can either try it first with a month. That's the coaching booster, or you dive straight in and be like, no, Josie, I want to have 3, 6, 12 or whatever, how many months of a coaching package. And I'm also in August launching my membership. So that's more a group kind of like program. It's a community with like-minded women where we can come together and support another to all really authentically go our own ways. But we have that support in our side pocket.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing the middle with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Lacey. This was fun.
Thanks for sharing the middle with me. As always, I hope you've been able to see a little bit of yourself in the story we shared today. Don't forget to follow, share, rate, review, and follow me on social media at Lacey Shares. You can always check out the Joyful Support Movement at joyfulsupportmovement.com and see all of the amazing goodness we have there, like No Shame in the Home Game, Pops of Joy, courses, resources, and of course, the Joyful Support Village. All right, now go out there and spread some joy.